Hello and welcome to In Touch with Durham County. I'm Deborah Craig-Ray, General Manager of Strategic Planning and Innovation. It's our pleasure to welcome back our County Manager, Wendell Davis, to the show today. Welcome to In Touch.
Thank you, Deborah. It's good to be back with you.
I checked and it's probably been a while, I think around 2016 when we had you here before.
Wow, has it been that long?
Yes.
Wow. Didn't feel like it. We've been exceptionally busy, but time does move on.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I know at the time we had you before, we were just working on the reorganization that you've done and continuing to refine our managing for results model. So we're going to take some time to kind of update the community about where things are with Durham County. You ready to go?
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right. Well, certainly managing for results model is the model that we operate with. We worked for years on that model, developing the quadrants and putting in the work that underpins that. So I think the residents would kind of like to know where we are with that right now.
So, Deborah, I'm pleased to report that over the last 3 years, we have been able to take our various departments, our budgets, break them down in a way that disaggregates data and subsequently gives us the ability to really be analytical in that space. To date, we have about 2,300 metrics that have been identified across the enterprise that employees, department directors, general managers are looking at and studying on the regular in order to utilize that data in our aim to make better decisions.
Mm-hmm. And certainly 2,300 metrics just kind of, again, as you said, helps our organization make better decisions. Now, I know we are really invested in the data and then, of course, in systems that help us track those data. ClearPoint and Power BI. Talk about them and what made us select those.
Absolutely. So first of all, I want to give proper deference to the Board of Commissioners because those were some very critical investments for the organization. In light of those investments in ClearPoint and in Power BI, we've, as I said earlier, been able to not only capture the data, identify and design the metrics, but we can do the analytical work that's associated with our ability to make good decisions. Power BI, just as a case in point, gives us the ability to look at our budget in ways that we have never been able to look at it before. We can go down to the line item category and subsequently look over a 5-year trend. Say, for example, if I've got a department that comes to me year over year and consistently requests additional funding, and subsequently the year prior or the year prior to that, they did not spend all of their funding, even at the line item level, I'm able to determine that, look at those 5-year trends, and really make some judgment calls about where we need to be culling back, where we need to be making more investments, and what our capacity is as an organization. That is critical, obviously, in these times that we are in. As I always tell the staff and my commissioners, trees don't grow to the sky, and we unfortunately don't have an unlimited pot of resources.
Right.
And so subsequently what that means is we've got to be extremely efficient going forward in terms of how we remain good stewards of the public resources. And one of the ways that we are trying to do that work as a part of the systems building is making sure that we have, the analytical capabilities, and the Power BI system gives us that. ClearPoint, which is essentially a complementary component of it and a great piece of software, affords us the opportunity to warehouse, if you will, all of our metrics and data and explanatory variables that in fact support those respective metrics. And as I said before, it's system building. We're in process now in an organization of a couple of thousand people of trying to make sure that everybody understands what the direction is that we're moving in, but just as importantly, get accustomed to doing our work in a new way, because, it comes as no surprise. We've not always operated sort of with a business mindset inside government in terms of how we look at problem solving, but more importantly, how we utilize data to get better decision making and hopefully better outcomes for our community. So, that learning and evaluation quadrant of our Managing for Results model. I'm happy to report it's in full effect right now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that we had a completely green organization, but having never done the work this way, it effectively meant that we have a lot of work to do in the way of training still and development of the organization in that space. But I'm, very pleased in respect to where we are at this juncture in the process. As we always think about change itself. Jim Johnson over at the Keenan Flagler School of Business, he often says that, change is in fact the only constant.
Mm-hmm.
And, in light of the times that we're in, and again, the limited resources and the work, the economic environment, we have to be, very diligent and deliberate about how we make good decisions and how we do service delivery in this public space.
Certainly. And of course, the fact that we have this data available, it just supports our philosophy of transparency.
Oh, absolutely. And mentioning transparency, I just want to say for our listening audience at home, one of the other investments that, we have been able to sort of partner up with some other folks in the IT world and spaces in the open data space. And so the good thing about the work that we're doing is, it will be out there for public consumption. A lot of this data and information can easily, sort of in the innovative space, be transitioned to business opportunities for those who are in fact in the private sector. I'll talk a little bit later about sort of some of the innovation work that is in fact going on. But ideally, from the perspective of transparency, I'd also like to inform the public that we are rolling out our transparency portal, which in effect will give the public, the layman, the opportunity to sort of sign on to the county's website, go in through the transparency portal, look at the program level in respect to what we're measuring, what the data is telling us, do trend analysis, and all of those other things. And so it's a great place for us to be at this point. Back when I came back, Deborah, there were just a lot of decisions that we made that were based on anecdotes.
That's right.
And that's not really a good way to be making decisions, to be quite frank. And so, as such, when I look at things, for example, like our EMS operations, today in our EMS operations, by virtue of the fact that we are in a space that we can look at predictive analytics, we know down to a fine science how to station our ambulance, and we know how to station those ambulances around the community, and how to site our EMS stations as a result of call volumes, the timing, peak call times when these calls come in. We also know that the average age is, even during those peak call times, is between age 55 and 62.
Yeah.
That helps us in respect to trying to design future solutions around how we service and serve this population. That's just one small example of what is happening in that space around predictive analytics that we are able to do as a result of having data systems now that can tell us this. And I think that for the most part, we will get a lot better in this space around that. In addition to that, just another case in point, we have in the EMS space a community paramedic program. That community paramedic program was established a couple of years ago. And so, it cost us obviously to send an ambulance every time essentially the alarm goes off or the 911 call comes in. With the community paramedic program, we can send a paramedic out there, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in a big ambulance with the lights glowing. It could be in a much smaller vehicle. And that affords us the opportunity to essentially meet service demands of that population. It also helps us know who the frequent callers are.
That's right.
And we
That's
can
right.
get to them, considerably quicker and render the service. And so data and analytics, it affords us the opportunity to, make, tremendous strides in those spaces and places. And I can go sort of across the enterprise, whether it's essentially in our prenatal program, our pretrial program over at our criminal justice partnership program, whether we're looking at things like our child welfare staffing analysis and how we do those ratios now to, anything from how our mandated inspections are performed in our public health department. And so the data is coming to life in ways that we've not been able to use it, and it is informing our decision making. Have we perfected it? No, we absolutely have not, because as I said before, we have an organization of a couple of thousand folks, and subsequently we have the good fortune of going through this learning exercise together as an organization and growing together and understanding the systems building that's required in order for us to, be the best that we can be and be the best public stewards that we can be. The last thing I'll say before you ask your next question is one of the things that we are doing is reading Hans Rosling's work now, Factfulness, to try and help inform our work in that space. Factfulness is a great book. Hans Rollins, the subtopic is 10 Reasons We're Wrong About the World and Why Things Are Better Than You Think. And it's a very interesting read, particularly in the space around the work that we are trying to do in terms of becoming more analytical. And he has multiple examples throughout the book, but when you start out in the text, he talks about the scientist, the chimpanzee in you.
Right. And
subsequently, he goes through this series of questions, and of course, guess who wins out in terms of getting the questions right? And it's the chimpanzee.
Yes.
And the chimpanzee wins essentially because one of the things that Hans talks about is, in our thinking too oftentimes, whether it's in journalism and business and education, we tend to go to the extremes as opposed to getting to the heart of the facts. And when we get to the heart of the facts, things may or may not be, as bad as we think they are. And so what we are trying to do is to redirect our thinking in that space in a way that we can get to the hard facts, and that better positions us, obviously, down the road to make better decisions.
Absolutely. Well, we're doing some great work. And of course, that work's not going to be done without our wonderful employees. So
absolutely,
we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the work that's being done to support our employees, whom I think you call our greatest human capital.
Absolutely.
All right. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we will continue our conversation with our Durham County Manager, Wendell Davis. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're continuing our conversation with our County Manager, Wendell Davis. Using data to help inform decisions, that's Durham County's continuing goal. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. So now let's shift a little bit and talk about our employees. Now, I know you often spend a lot of time engaging with our employees, and they love that. During the year, an employee survey was conducted. Mm-hmm. And what were some of the responses that we received?
So, Deborah, before I get into the responses, I do want to reflect back on something I said earlier about systems building. And one of the things I've been doing is essentially working with Dion Hines on staff in order to look at how we can do a much better at our community engagement piece. We are using sort of our bicycle as an analogy in this systems process. And so obviously bicycles have seats and pedals and a chain. They have a seat tube. there's a top tube and a bottom tube, and there are wheels and spokes and handlebars and all of those things. Employees are essentially the most critical part of that system's building. Mm-hmm. And I always subscribe from that old adage that, a happy employee is in fact a productive employee.
Yes.
And so, yes, we have conducted a employee survey over the past year or so for the express purposes of me being able to sort of gauge exactly where we are and what we need to be improving on in order to keep that productive employee. And so, yes, in doing the survey this year, we had about 52% of our workforce who participated in the survey. And just to share a few things with you, obviously there were things that were high percentages of agreement on. There were things that were not so high. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we learned that most of our employees feel good about the job that they are doing, the work they are doing. They essentially feel that the work that they're doing has special meaning and things of that nature. Obviously, we all live and work in an environment where we have to consistently put, food on the table, and so compensation was an issue that consistently came up time and time again throughout the survey. And then, of course, there are some basic things that we can do better inside the organization, around communications and those sorts of things. All organizations facing it. All organizations face those kinds of challenges. But I am happy to say that I think for the most part, and in working with the consultant that we did, the overall results in terms of where we stand as an organization was pretty high when we compare ourselves to other enterprises, both public and private, in respect to how employees feel about us as an employer. Mm-hmm. And so that makes me feel very proud because, as I said, our most prized assets, they walk out of the door, as Jim Goodnight says over at SAS, every day at the end of the day, and they come back. And, that's how we are subsequently able to deliver the services at a high level and hopes of keeping our citizens, as happy as we can keep them, in light of the services that we are in fact rendering.
Absolutely. And I know another thing that you've expressed is that you want to make sure that Durham County is an employer of choice.
Absolutely.
Among local governments. How are we doing with that?
Yeah, so, good people can go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we happen to be participating in a regional economy whereby folks come to work into Durham every day from 36 different counties. And that's a good thing. It essentially means that we're an employment hub on the one hand, but on the other hand, in many of those places and spaces, it means that folks locally and even those who come within, they have lots of different choices and they can go anywhere, which effectively means that the competition is steep even in the public space. And so what we have to do is to figure out ways that give us an opportunity to distinguish ourselves and to make us an employer of choice. I feel very proud of the fact that, a few years back, we were the first jurisdiction in the Southeast region to go to a $15 an hour living wage rate for all of our employees. We did it. The Board of Commissioners supported it. Mm-hmm. We went right out of the gate and did that. It sort of set the tone and the trend, I think, not just in the region, but, in the southeastern portion of the United States. In addition to that, we did things like policies that gave our employees an opportunity to say, if you were having a kid, then subsequently you got to take, that family leave in a way that afforded you the opportunity to be there during those critical time periods that kid, was just first coming home. And, I think for the modern day employee, and particularly as we think about the millennial, we have to understand that the workforce of old, it doesn't necessarily meet their needs. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the biggest constants, I think, in this work environment that we are in, whether you're in government, business or higher education. That constant is essentially change. And so we've got to be adaptable and nimble and flexible enough to make sure that we're affording ourselves to get the best talent that we can get, because it is only with the best talent that you can do the best service delivery. And so that's been extremely important to me. It will remain at the forefront of, the work that I do. Our Mayor Bill Bell's dear friend, he used to always say, nobody achieves anything by themselves. We all rely upon others in order to make good things happen. And so, I've always subscribed to that philosophy, and that's essentially how I try and employ that philosophy throughout the organization to make sure that we got the best talent that we can get.
Well, it seems that Durham County is putting itself on the map, because another situation we've noticed that Durham County has kind of transformed into a leader among its peers. We've won some significant national and statewide awards in across the enterprise.
We have, Deborah. In fact, without sounding boastful or bragging, that list of awards are actually too long for me to sort of list. But, I'm very proud of the workforce that we have and many of the recognitions that we have got nationally and statewide. For the 3 years running right now, we have been identified as one of the most digital counties essentially in the country, and we've consistently been within the top 5. Last year, we actually breached the second place position, and I feel very good about that. And that comes again as a result of many of the investments that we've made in the technology space, in the areas of innovation. For example, I did a white paper back a couple of 3 years ago, and the whole premise behind the white paper was to create an opportunity inside the organization for our employees to feel like it was okay to think outside of the box. And as a result of that, we joined the Alliance for Innovation, and being a part of that national organization, have been recognized as one of the more innovative communities. And so, it makes me feel good, man. We got some cutting edge staff, of course, that's doing that work. And innovation will be critical going forward, and it's going to essentially give us the opportunity to drive the business process improvements, or continuously drive the business process improvements that we are seeing. It's going to obviously better position us as a community to make the kinds of decisions, again, that we can be proud of, and consistently, submit awards and compete, with our other jurisdictions around the country, and respect to, being recognized as a managed, well-run county.
Absolutely. Now, my last point was going to be about our innovation team. We have a very good team that works throughout the organization. Talk about them a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm extremely excited about the work they're doing, and the work that they're doing is kind of at multiple levels. For example, as we think throughout our enterprise, we've got that team of folks, should I say. They move around the organization. They aid and assist with, outside the box thinking, if you will, doing a lot of the human design work and human design thinking, to look at cutting edge ways of, business process improvement. Most importantly, there are idea labs that we partner with the city of Durham on, and that's an opportunity once again for them to come together in creative space, think through complex issues, and look for better solutions in respect to how we solve some of those problems. And I think the last thing I will say in that space that I'm proud of, in terms of much of the work that they are doing, has to do with Innovate Durham. So Innovate Durham is sort of an opportunity. A few years back, we partnered with the American Tobacco campus down at the Underground, and created some space between our public sector and the private sector to begin thinking about private sector opportunities that they could come in and essentially help us with problem solving. And this Innovate Durham piece is sort of an opportunity for companies to come in, understand challenges that we in fact might have inside government, think about business solutions for them in hopes that, it could ultimately be the incubation or a startup company that then, in fact, can move its way throughout the government contracting space and employ people and contribute ultimately to our tax base. And so it's really the work that was kind of akin to, I say, in many respects, the founding of the internet. If you think about sort of how that came about a bunch of years ago, the federal government needed to invest in this underground sort of system, technology, and information system that could sustain itself throughout a nuclear war. And the federal government put like the first third of the funding in place. Then the National Science Foundation came along and subsequently funded the second third. And then, of course, you look today and you see our vast World Wide Web and internet. It took that kind of investment and initiative and innovation to sort of get that process started. And so in that space, we are trying to make our contribution in order to contribute to the bottom line, not just of our tax base, but continuing that work of being a creative class community that affords us the opportunity to attract good talent, have companies, big corporations, and medium-sized and small, want to come here as a result of not just the brain trust that we have in all of these high-tech firms, but the cutting-edge stuff that we are trying to do inside local government as well, as a partner.
Well, we want to thank you so much for joining us and just kind of updating us on where we are. And certainly our community has got to feel very proud about the way their local government is managed.
Well, Deborah, I want to thank you and your team and certainly all of the other general managers. As I said, no one achieves anything by themselves. I try and, set the vision and the direction, but you got to have good people in order to follow it and execute. We continue to do a great job in that space, and I'm, proud to be a part of the team.
Excellent. Well, we want to thank you so much for joining us today. And from all of us at Durham County Government, enjoy your family and friends, and best wishes for a safe holiday season. Cheers.